Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. You know, the best way I find for finding out what is important to people in my electorate is to head down to our local markets every weekend. I head down to, we've got the Albert Street Market on the Saturday and the Clovelly Market on the Sunday. And when I talk with people at those markets, I hear some pretty clear things about what it is that people want out of life. They want a place to live. Most people want to own their own home, but everybody wants a warm, dry, safe place to live. They want a job. They want a decent job that pays decent wages. They want to know that that job is secure, that job will be available for them tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. They want to know that their family is safe. They want to know that their family will be healthy. They want to know that their family is going to get good education. They want to know that their family has opportunities in life. And they want a future for themselves. They want the opportunity to get ahead. They want the opportunity to advance in life. And they want their kids to have better opportunities than what they had when they grew up. Some pretty basic things, but I think that is pretty much what everybody in New Zealand wants. That's what people want out of life, and those are the kinds of things that people expect their government to support them in. And Labour backs them in that, sir. And Labour has the policies to help people to get ahead in life. But before we can do all of that stuff, we've got to make sure that the books are balanced, that the country is being run in a sensible manner, and that the government's books are in good shape. And Labour has a good history on this. 9 years in government under Helen Clark, 9 years of surpluses. Zero net debt by the beginning of 2008. Labour ran surpluses and Labour paid off the debt. And Labour got the government books into a position where when the rainy day came, there was room for the national government to move. There was room for the national government to borrow. And they borrowed $54 million over 5 years. $54 billion, I should say. $54 billion, if only it was only $54 million. $54 billion. And look, that had to happen. That had to happen, but of course they squandered a lot of that on tax cuts for the very rich, and they put the GST up for ordinary working people, and they put the prescription charges up for ordinary working people, and they put the GP fees up for ordinary working people to pay for those tax cuts that went to the top 10%. That's what happened whilst the government was borrowing that $54 billion. So what people were looking for in this budget was a sign that the government actually had control over the finances. And that's why this government has been so keen to try and convince people that there's actually a surplus. But we know the surplus is made up. We know the surplus is absolutely made up, because if the surplus wasn't made up, they would be making cuts to ACC levies this year, not waiting till next year, not putting them off to the following year. In this budget year, there'd be ACC levy cuts. And of course there should be cuts to ACC levies, because of course the government put your ACC levies up when they claimed that there was a crisis. They created a phony crisis when National came into government. And what was the result of that? ACC made a $5 billion surplus. That's your money, New Zealand. That's your money that the government has taken from you to try and create their phony surplus this year with their fudged numbers. That's where your money has gone. So most of this has come from the motor vehicle account. So everybody who owns a car, everybody who owns a motorbike, everybody who drives for a living is being overtaxed by this government so that they can create their phony surplus. So New Zealand wants the government to get the books back into good order, but they actually want to see real evidence. They want to see the economy growing. That's how they want to see the government get the books back into surplus, not by overtaxing them and overcharging them in every manner they possibly can. The poor old paper boys, remember that? When they decided to tip the poor old paper boys on their head and get every little bit of loose change out of their pockets. That's how this government has created its phony surplus. But what this government failed to address with this budget was the issue of housing. Housing affects absolutely everybody. If you own your own house, then you're going to be pretty worried about interest rates going up. Interest rates going up, even though general inflation, if you take the tax increases on cigarettes out of general inflation, is absolutely nil. The only thing that's driving prices up is the tax increase on cigarettes, and yet interest rates are going up. Why? Because that government has failed to address the housing crisis in Auckland. If you're planning to buy your first home, then the government has just made that a lot harder as well, because we've got these loan-to-value ratios where people now have to get a 20% deposit to buy their own home. Not just in Auckland, where there is a housing inflation crisis, not just in Christchurch, where because of the rebuild house prices are going up, but all across New Zealand. In my own city of Palmerston North, people cannot afford to buy their first home now because they have to put that 20% deposit together. I was talking to someone about a month ago who's just moved into a senior management role. They're in their early 40s, they've got a couple of kids, they've worked all their life, they studied, they got a good job, they've worked all their life, they've done everything right, they've tried to put the money together for a deposit for a first home, they thought they were just about there. They were just about there, and then the rules changed, and the dream of home ownership for that family who have done everything right is again just out of reach. Thanks very much to this national government. If you're in a rental house, then the quality of rental housing has been completely overlooked by this government. Yes, they've done a little bit of work around state housing, but most people live in private rental accommodation, and the quality of that is going down while the rents keep heading up. And woe betide if you live in a state house, because you're probably just about to get kicked out of your state house. And of course, what we know is up and down the country, this government is getting rid of state houses. 500 state houses to be taken out of the city of Palmerston North, an extra 100 to be taken out of Ian McKelvey's electorate in the wider Manawatu. So if you drive down Rugby Street in Palmerston North at the moment, you'll see state houses being knocked down. If you drive along Botanical Road in Palmerston North right now, you'll see land that has been empty for years, where state houses were taken away and nothing has ever been done with that land by this government. And if you drive around Farnham Avenue in Palmerston North right now, you'll see boarded up, empty state houses that are deteriorating in quality, that are having the hot water cylinders stolen out of them, that are being covered in graffiti because that government over there has shut so many state houses across the country and is doing absolutely nothing with them, and is devaluing one of the largest state-owned assets in this country. That's the record of that national government. Mr. Speaker, it can be a lot better. It can be a lot better, and under a Labour government, things will be a lot better. We have our Kiwi Build plan to build 100,000 homes across the country. That will take the pressure off housing affordability in Auckland. It'll mean that the loan-to-value ratios won't have to be applied in the provinces where people are being hammered by these. That is a bold plan, and that's what Labour wants to do. We have some bold plans for monetary policy as well. It's not good enough that interest rates are being driven up when there is no inflation in New Zealand. That's not good enough. But David Parker has actually been thinking about this. Thinking's not something that's really the strong point over in National. David Parker's been thinking about this, and he has come up with this brilliant idea of making sure that KiwiSaver is compulsory, first of all, so that can be used rather than increasing interest rates to take some heat out of the economy, but also variable KiwiSaver rates, so that rather than having to pay more money to the bank, you actually get to put more money into your savings, and that'll be available for you when you retire. That's smart policy, that's thinking policy, and those are the kind of policies that we're coming up with over here in Labour. We need to make sure that we put a bit of a lid on offshore speculation in the housing market in New Zealand. There's no value in foreign capital going into residential housing. Where foreign capital creates innovation, where foreign capital creates jobs, where foreign capital creates better opportunities for New Zealand, that's a good thing. But there's no value from foreign capital being poured into our houses. It just pushes the prices up, and it makes the dream of owning your own home that much further out of reach for ordinary Kiwis. Sir, there is a clear difference here between a budget that delivers nothing for ordinary New Zealanders and a Labour Party that wants to put people first and put people at the centre of our policies and to back New Zealanders to get the future they want.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was in that member's electorate about 3 weeks